Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are having a great week so far. Today, we are going to get into just the basics of programming for specific muscle qualities. So, we went over 1RM already, and once you have that number, and we're just going to use the example 100 pounds as your max lift for whatever exercise we're doing, so it makes sense and it's easy to do your calculations. But based off that, we can define where we need to be at with a power range, a strength range, a hypertrophy range, and a muscular endurance range. So, power is going to be a few reps and it's explosive and it's fast. So, there's an inverse relationship between the strength and the speed of power. So, if I'm at my 1RM, I'm going to be very, very slow and not super powerful. But if I have a lot lighter load on the bar, I'm going to be a lot faster and a lot more powerful. Then we've got strength, which doesn't necessarily have a speed assigned to it, that's more power. And then hypertrophy is the increase of your muscle cross sectional area. So when you think about hypertrophy, you're going to probably think about bodybuilders. You want to gain more mass and more size. And then we have muscular endurance, which is being able to sustain a submaximal load for a long period of time. So when we're talking about strength training, that's going to be anything over 12 repetitions. You can't do a high percentage for 12 reps, but you could probably do something between 67 and 85%. You guys will see that on the chart for multiple repetitions like that. So, as an athlete or as just an individual, if you're an athlete, you have to look at what your sport demands. So, is it muscular endurance? Most sports aren't going to require a ton of hypertrophy. You might build this in the off season if you're a smaller individual and you have some type of a contact sport that you play. Yes, you need strength, and yes, most sports you need to be powerful with, but you just need to look at that. But if you're not training for a specific sport, then you should incorporate all components at some point during your training program just to be really well rounded. All right, so this is the relationship of intensity, which we're talking about load, and then your repetitions. So, one rep, I can do 100%. So, let's say I can back squat my 1RM rep max. The most weight that I can do for one rep is 100 pounds. So, your strength range, you're going to be between 1 and 6 reps here. 6 reps being at 85%. And I'll show you guys a chart that breaks it down incrementally. So, you can do 6 reps at 85% most likely. These are typically percentages done with trained athletes. So just because you can do 100 pounds for one rep does not mean that you might be able to do 85 pounds for 6 reps. It might only be 3 or 4. Or you might be better at more of the hypertrophy range and you might actually be able to squeeze out 7. If you start squeezing out too many reps or too few reps and you get out of these ranges, you can assume that your one rep max probably increased. So if I can, knock out 8 or 9 at what I think my 85% is, most likely I didn't hit a true one rep max. So then for hypertrophy, when you guys are thinking about increasing muscle size, the goal percent is between 67 and 85% for 6 to 12 reps. That doesn't mean that you can't increase hypertrophy if you did 5 reps or if you did 13 or 14 reps. These are the standards on the research that has been done, but different people respond differently to different rep ranges. So just this is the most ideal, but it doesn't mean that if you do a little bit more or a little bit less, you're not still gaining some of the hypertrophy, muscle size increase benefits. And then when it comes to endurance, typically anything over 12 reps and it's less than 67%. So a lot of this you guys can think of, body weight exercises are going to be good for muscular endurance. Low intensity. All right, and this is just the chart. If you don't like the visual image that I showed you guys, this is explaining the exact same thing, except for it's more in chart form. And also we add in power for multiple and single. So you'll see strength, 85% or greater, we saw that on the chart, and 6 or less reps. So when we're looking at sets and then rest period over here on the right, this is what's recommended. So let's say you're doing 2 sets of 6 back squats. So you'll do 6 reps, you'll rest 2 to 5 minutes, and you'll do 6 more reps. This is going to be ideal for strength between 2 and 6. If you're newer or you're doing a new cycle and you're trying to get better at a movement, you might only do 2 sets. When you're trying to build progressive overload and get better, maybe in a couple weeks that starts feeling pretty easy. So now you can do 3 sets or 4 sets and you can kind of build up from there. Typically, the heavier of the weight you're going, the more you're going to rest. So if you're doing really heavy singles in the high 90 percentiles, you're probably going to be resting closer to the 4 to 5 minute range. Also, an important note to think about for females, most all research shows that females recover faster in between sets. So females, whenever you feel ready, just make sure you're giving yourself at least 2 minutes for everything to resynthesize in your body to be ready to go again. When we're looking at power for single rep, 1 to 2, thinking about heavy snatches and heavy clean and jerks, 80 to 90%. Of course, if you're competing, you're going for 100%. But this is rep ranges mostly for athletes that aren't specific Olympic lifters. Set ranges 3 to 5, 2 to 5 minutes rest. And you guys can read through these. For hypertrophy, if you guys are trying to increase muscle size, 67 to 85%, 6 to 12 reps, 3 to 6 sets. Less rest here, 30 to 90 seconds. So when you guys are doing your heavy sets or your high repetition sets of squats, make sure you're not giving yourself 2 to 5 minutes of rest, because you're not going to create the adaptation as well as if you shorten your rest here. And then muscular endurance. Endurance kind of tells us that, oh, okay, we need to be able to do this for a long time. We're probably not going to get a lot of rest here. So over 12 reps, 2 to 3 sets, not as much, and then less than 30 seconds rest between sets. And when you look down here and you see the 2 for 2 rule, basically let's say you've been doing 3 sets of 5 on back squat and for 3 weeks now. And it's week 4, and that 3 sets of 3 doesn't feel very heavy anymore. So if you can do 2 extra reps on your last set, so now let's say you did your first 2 sets, 3 reps, and then your last set, you were able to squeeze out 5 reps. If you can do that for the same workout 2 weeks in a row, now you probably need to retest your 1 rep max. And this is going to happen a lot more in newer lifters because they make neurological adaptations a lot faster than more advanced lifters. All right, so when you guys think about wanting to get better at hypertrophy and strength, but primarily hypertrophy, there's something called tempo training. And if you've ever seen a workout written out like this, 3x3, let's say it's deadlifts at 3030, this is a tempo prescription, and usually you're only going to see it in the off season. But what this means is this first letter here, the 3, is the eccentric portion. The second is the bottom. The third is the concentric, so that's standing up phase. And then the last is the top. So this will be inversed on pull-ups, things where you're not starting with the weight at the top, deadlifts as well. So think about the eccentric as the lowering. So if I'm doing pull-ups and I'm at the top of the bar, that slow lower down is going to be the eccentric, and then the pull up is the concentric, the shortening of the muscles. On a deadlift, the pull up, the first phase is actually concentric, and then the slow lowering down, the lengthening of the muscles is going to be eccentric. You've probably commonly heard these called negatives. That's kind of the common terminology, but technically they're called eccentrics. So if I play here, this is a position deadlift, so that's why it's pausing at 3 different positions, but you'll see it's slow on the way down. So 1, 2, 3, big breath, 3, 2, 1. That's going to cause more muscle damage. The most muscle damage that can actually be caused is through eccentrics, which is going to increase my size and my strength a lot better than just doing normal reps with no slow tempo. Now, you don't want to do these all the time, and especially for athletes, because they make you very sore because it's eliciting a lot more muscle damage. All right, pull-ups as well. If you cannot do a certain amount of pull-ups or you want to get better at pull-ups, it's a really good idea to incorporate eccentrics into your pull-ups. So if you can't do the concentric phase, the pulling up, you can do an increased box height where you jump up to the top and then really focus on a slow lowering down. A lot of people use bands, but that's not actually going to make you as good, as fast as these negatives will. So if you look here, pull up, and then 3, 2, 1, back up, 3, 2, 1. So when you're new to pull-ups, let's say you can't do one at all, you might not be able to control yourself down for 3 seconds. It might only be 2. As you get stronger, you'll be able to increase that. Maybe you can do 4 seconds down or 5 seconds down. And there's like a direct relationship with how many pull-ups you can do without the eccentrics with how long you can go on that slow eccentric phase. So if someone can do 10 pull-ups without assistance, or they can do weighted pull-ups, that slow eccentric, they're probably going to be able to do, 10 to 15 seconds slow down. But this also, remember, it creates a lot of muscle damage, so you're going to be a lot more sore here. So any exercise that you want to get a lot better at, push-ups, anything like that, handstand push-ups, make sure you're going on the down phase a lot slower. This is the same for bench press. So you can overload a muscle group. Let's say you can't push up 300 pounds, you're doing a bench press, but you have people that lift that weight up, and you can't push it up, but you start in that top position, and then you slowly lower it down to your chest. You can overload the muscle more than you can actually lift, and that increases strength a lot faster. All right, so here's that chart I promised you guys. If you look up over here, 100%, you can do it once. If you can do it more than once, it probably wasn't your 1RM. And then, again, this is for athletes that they've tested. So if you're new to it, it's probably not going to be the same. But if you've trained, several months and you have a pretty good training age, you'll do pretty well here. 95% you can typically do for 2 reps, 93% for 3, and then all the way down. So keep that in mind when you guys are giving yourself a goal and you're writing out workouts for yourself. That you're not saying, hey, I'm going to do 15 reps at 77%, because typically speaking, that's the exception, not the rule. You probably won't be able to do that, and if you can, you need to retest your 1RM. All right, when you guys are programming for exercise order, power goes first because it's the most neurologically demanding and most often the most technical movement. So like a power clean. Then second is strength, so maybe you're doing a 5x5 on your back squat. And then third is accessory. Also think about largest to smallest muscle groups. So glutes, quads, hamstrings. Typically if you're doing a full body power exercise, you're incorporating all of those muscles. Then you go back, chest, shoulders, triceps, biceps, calves, neck, abs. Biceps and triceps, those should not be done first is what they're saying. If you fatigue the smaller muscles in your body and then you go and try to do a technical lift, you're increasing your risk for injury. The exception here is for more trained athletes. There is a famous strength coach named Joe Ken, and his quote is, "You need to be explosive in the final minute of the game just as much as the first." So he, with his athletes, very occasionally will have them do something powerful and explosive at the end of the workout just to make sure that they can sustain that. But you wouldn't do that with newer people because you are at a higher risk of injury if it's super, super technical. So keep that in mind. All right, this is a typical formatting for exercise. You got your power first, so something like a 5x2 at 85%. Hang clean, that's above the knee. Strength, back squat, 4x4, 85%. And then accessories. So why you guys don't see percentages for accessories is because most likely with these movements, it's not safe to do a 1RM. So you're not actually going to know what the percentages are for things like a dip or maybe a pull-up. Some people do weighted pull-ups, but 1 rep max on a pull-up, not necessarily a great idea. But think these things like shrugs, plank, single leg squat, you definitely should not try to 1 rep max that. Anything that is more unilateral and not a structural exercise. So if it's not a bench press, if it's not an overhead press or a clean or a squat or a deadlift and it's more unilateral and it's an accessory exercise, like a good morning, even though that's bilateral, should not be maxed out. So what you can do there is, let's say you want to be kind of around 85% or 80%. We'll use that as the example. Since you can't program that because you don't know what 100% is, you can say, all right, I want you guys to do a set of 10 and make it at a difficulty of 8. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it? 10 being the hardest that it can be and 1 being super unchallenging. It's super, super easy. So if you're pushing yourself to an 8, you can kind of guesstimate that that's about 80%. So that's kind of how you're going to track that. You won't have a percentage because, again, you won't know the percentage. Same exercise examples except for its upper body, same formatting. You guys can look over that and pause the video. Another thing to note, so many people say, oh, you have to be constantly varied all the time because you will burn more calories. Well, that's true as far as calorie burn because you're going to be inefficient at something you don't know how to do well. But progressive overload means I'm getting good at something for at least 3 to 4 weeks. I'm going to do squats every Monday, and I'm going to do deadlifts every Wednesday, and I'm going to either increase the number of repetitions I do with the same weight, or I'm going to stay at the same number of repetitions and try to increase the weight. It's progressive overload. You have to overload your muscles with the same movement several weeks in a row to actually adapt to what you need to adapt to. And then this is good for you guys too. So for hypertrophy, increasing muscle size, 1+ means it's the least amount as far as all of these go. You get 5+, this helps the most. So body weight exercises don't help hypertrophy a ton. Machine-based exercises a little bit more. Weightlifting derivatives, even more. Plyometrics, not so much. Eccentric training, what we've been talking about. That's going to do it the most, along with variable resistance training when you guys start getting into bands and chains and all of those things that you would learn in an upper level exercise science class. And then going to strength, again, body weight's not going to help that. Eccentric training most definitely does. For power, body weight definitely helps that, but the most is going to be weightlifting derivative, potentiation complexes, and then ballistic training. So you guys can take a look at that chart. I know a lot of my exercise science students are like, how do we increase hypertrophy when we don't have equipment? Well, you're going to have to try to do body weight eccentrics because without that overload stimulus of weights, it's really not going to happen as much as you want it to happen. And then again, remember, select the appropriate exercises. So upper body pull examples, upper body pushes, lower body pull, lower body push. Always throw in a loaded carry and a core exercise. And if you have one thing from each of these, at least in your program every single week, it's going to be a more well-rounded exercise program. And then you can throw in your accessories that you want to, get bigger rear delts. That's going to be specific to the individual person. Some people naturally have the genetics to already have those, and some don't. So they have to do, more face pulls and things like that. So if you guys have any questions on this, please ask me in the chat or send me an email, and I will be sure to answer that.